Mariah has caused a musical earthquake by finally collaborating with Ariana. Now, for years, rumours of a feud have been widespread, and in this video we'll be examining their relationship and analysing how the music industry can divide women. Hi, I'm Diva Talk, and before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel and get weekly videos analysing your favourite divas from Mariah to Whitney and even veterans like Patti LaBelle. And welcome to the conversation.
It is like the next or the new Mariah Carey. It's just, the fuck does that mean? Like, I'm the Mariah Carey.
When Ariana broke away from acting to concentrate on her singing career, the reviews of her first album were positive. Here was a woman who seemed to provide an antidote to an age of pop when image trumped vocals, and the vocals we did hear were, well, they were average at best. Ariana burst on the scene with legitimate singing chops, and she showed great potential. Her cover of Mariah Carey's iconic #1 song Emotions gained viral attention. Comparisons quickly were made with Ariana's debut and Mariah, specifically the Daydream album and that mid-90s period of Carey's career. In my honest opinion, I think these comparisons were not only justified and, don't hate me, they were unfortunately a weakness in the creative armour of Grande, or at least the executives pulling the strings. Mariah noted early in her career, the powers that be were interested in copying Whitney style and applying that to Carey's music. Now we have to remember that a music label is fundamentally interested in profit. If a company can repeat a tried and tested formula of success, then they will not only advise it, they will enforce it. As a result, Mariah was often pressured into working with the same producers as Houston to duplicate her sound and hopefully her chart supremacy. Now, Mariah already had her vision and often fought hard against the Columbia view of Carey's sound. And if you'd like to listen to more about this in an in-depth analysis, I'll be releasing a video next week discussing the relationship between racism, the music industry, and Mariah's career.
That's what's happening. We're being sat in the back of the bus television style.
But to get back to the issue at hand, I don't think we should hate on Ariana's debut and the Mariah-isms that it was saturated by, because I would argue this was a result of a persuasive label that wielded power and influence over a young budding singer who had little power but a big dream.
She's the greatest vocalist who's ever lived, and I love her. I grew up loving her.
When you couple that with the fact that Ariana had always idolized Mariah, it's not surprising that the line between inspiration and imitation became blurred. Ariana was still praised for her raw talent, for her raw potential. However, the comparisons were ubiquitous. Eventually, Billboard noted that to be called a miniaturized version of a musician who's been showcasing their aesthetic for decades implies that you're copying the past, hoping that time simply forgot the blueprint you're repurposing. No one wants to be seen as that girl. In 2014, Mariah sat down for an interview with The Breakfast Club, and during a light-hearted and candid interview, she was asked how she felt about the issue.
All right, Ariana Grande, they always say she's a young Mariah. How do you feel about those comparisons?
But I wish everybody all the best of luck, and if this is a career path that they choose, hope that they can achieve longevity.
Because, Jay-Z always says, don't compare me to nobody, I'm offended.
Jay-Z said a lot of things I agree with.
Now with this album... Now, I think this is a very human response. Carey was polite and cordial towards Ariana and only showed a degree of tension towards the conversation topic, and not necessarily Ariana herself. And if we look at this period in Mariah's career, an air of frustration is understandable. Mariah had an unusual hit, shall we say, with Beautiful. Although it never reached the top 10, it sold a moderate amount over a long period of time, and eventually went platinum. Unfortunately, the accompanying remix was cancelled when Mariah slipped and dislocated her arm during a video. Momentum for this era was halted and, if we're being honest, eventually lost. And when you combine that with multiple changes in management, multiple changes in the release date for the album, and the private separation of Mariah and Nick Cannon, this era for Mariah was turbulent. To then be consistently asked about the new Mariah on the scene, that's going to cause friction. No one wants to feel disposable, no one wants to feel replaced, and as Mariah was now in her 40s, the glaring shadow of ageism felt omnipresent. Would anyone who has sacrificed their life for their work for over 20 years enjoy the feeling that they're being cast aside, not because they are unable to still work, but because society would prefer a new model with less wrinkles? The fact that Mariah only said,
You said a lot of things I agree with.
Now with this album,
well, that highlights how polite she really was. You see, I don't think Mariah was frustrated with Ariana. I think she was frustrated with an industry that believed they could transpose the ideas of one singer onto another and deny that younger singers' right to freedom, creative freedom, and the ability to make mistakes and grow. Ariana would soon request that questions regarding Mariah would not be asked in interviews. And to be honest, I understand that requirement because the question was not a question. It was a shady declaration hidden within a question to drum up controversy and to add very little to the conversation. Fandoms, as they often do, became toxic and pathologically disagreeable. And all of a sudden, the frustration the two singers had with the same tired questions being asked every interview, well, that snowballed into this idea that a feud had developed. Memes such as these began circulating that simply added fire to the flame. And eventually, it was obvious that I would say the real, legitimate feud was between the Lambs and the disciples of Ariana. Now, with later projects, Ariana would move away from the Mariah-heavy inspiration and towards other kinds of sounds, and she explained this during her appearance on Carpool Karaoke.
you practiced being able to do that by listening to you just
Whitney,
listen to
Mariah,
it over and over and
Celine,
over.
Destiny's
Really?
Child, yeah, the divas. It took me a minute to find my own sound because I was just singing their songs so much growing up.
However, the supposed feud was still like a forest fire looking for shady trees to burn, and I think on one occasion Mariah, she added wood to the embers. In 2016, Andy Cohen asked Kerry whether or not she knew a list of female stars. Now this of course is influenced by the legendary shade Mariah threw at J-Lo. This happened when, in a conversation about music, she point blank refused to acknowledge J-Lo at all and simply uttered the famous words.
Und was ist mit J-Lo?
Die kenne ich nicht.
Oops.
Now, when Andy Cohen asked Mariah if she knew Ariana, her response was,
Ariana Grande, do you know her?
No.
Okay, you don't know her. Is she? When I looked at her early in the career, I thought, wow, this is kind of an homage to Mariah a little bit. Did you feel that?
I don't know when early in the career was.
I don't know, a couple of years ago. A couple of years, I don't know.
I don't know. I really don't. Honestly, I'm not familiar. I listen to hip hop more than I listen to pop music.
Now this wasn't exactly shade, but it wasn't exactly welcoming either. It reminds me of the kind of icy vibe that Whitney stirred up when asked about Mariah in the early 90s.
Last week we had Mariah Carey here in the studio.
You did? How is she doing?
Well, she was doing great.
Oh, great.
Yes.
It's great.
What I'm curious about, what do you think of her?
What do I think of her?
Yes?
I don't think of her. I don't think of her. Musically, what do I think of her?
Yes.
I think she's a good singer.
Look, we have to understand that behind the wigs, behind the entourage, the number ones, the glitter, these divas are human, with real emotions, real fears, legitimate fears. And as Mariah entered a period where her bad vocal days went viral,
I'm just gonna keep on waiting. I hear
Her great vocal days were unacknowledged by the media. And her music wasn't as commercially successful as the past. It's not surprising that she would address questions regarding the woman that many claimed would dethrone her with a level of passive-aggressive caution. Mariah dragged herself out of an unstable childhood full of neglect, drugs and violence, and became a star. The last thing she was going to do was abdicate, so understandably she was on the defensive. But as the years progressed, and Ariana found her own sound, the iciness began to melt into a sea of mutual admiration. Ariana greeted Mimi on her birthday, and Mariah shared this on her Instagram story. Ariana also participated in a video of friends and family singing All I Want for Christmas Is You, and when that perennial classic finally hit #1 in 2019, Ariana openly praised Mariah. Ultimately, I think, as Ariana claimed her own identity, and as that age-old expression, time heals everything, was applied, we began to see a warmer rapport. And then, in a year of unprecedented health issues, mass protest, and one of the most divisive election campaigns in living memory, 2020 threw one more surprise at us. And the collab between J-Hud, Mimi and Ari was released. It almost felt like a Motown girl group was formed, full of festive charm to brighten our mood, and more importantly, dispel the idea that there really was a feud in the first place. This, I think, was more a human issue, a dislike towards the feeling of being replaced, the problem of comparison and ageism and control in the music industry. And with the two singers' whistle notes entwined together, it was obvious that all really was well. So, what do you think of this new collab? Do you enjoy it? Tell me in the comment section. And until next time, this was Diva Talk, and thanks for watching.